Hello, and welcome back to Dueling Grounds. Unfortunately, Ryan can't be with us this week, so it's just me. We'll see how we get on. This week we have Vlad on Norman Osborn against Tim on Felia Exuberant Shepherd. Looking at the opening hands, Vlad's on the play. His hand looks pretty good with Misty Rainforest and Troll of Khazad-dûm as a second mana source. And he's got Stern Scolding, Subtlety, Psychic Frog, Snapcaster, Persist, all very good and cheap cards, and particularly like the line of him being able to discard the Troll either to itself or to Psychic Frog and then bring it back with the Persist. Tim, on the other hand, is facing the on-camera curse. He's mulligan to 5, although as a 5 it's pretty good. 2 lands, both his colours. Baird is an excellent follow-up to turn 1 Yoshi, and the Galadriel's Dismissal and the Reverent Mantra can both act as protection to keep his game plan intact. Anyway, let's get on with the games and see what happens. So, Vlad leads on Misty Rainforest, which he'll crack to find what will be an underground sea. We talked about Norman Osborn during the set review, and we felt like it could potentially be a replacement to Kefka, while not necessarily as powerful, much cheaper at 2 mana. And it'll be interesting to see if Vlad has built into his deck anything that helps with the unblockable connive aspect of Norman Osborn, whether he's got any auras or any buffs for it. We'll see. As Vlad finds his land, and he'll just pass back to Tim here and allow Tim to take his turn. Tim will unsurprisingly lead with Yoshi on turn 1. I'm just going to play it off the Sunbaked Canyon. I don't think he minds too much about losing the odd point of life here and there from his lands. It's not really a concern for his game plan. Interestingly enough as well, Tim is running a Jeskai version of Yoshi, although the only blue card I believe that in his deck is Mental Misstep, which is an excellent inclusion. Yoshi beats a Stern Scolding to no great surprise. Vlad draws an island for the turn and plays out the Psychic Frog, which has got to be pretty scary for Tim to see when he's already behind on cards. And this card can be quite difficult to kill, especially with Tim's red damage-based removal spells. Tim draws a fetch land, and he fetches for a plains. And we'll see if he's drawn anything. Doesn't seem to be worth playing the Baird out on this current board state, although I suppose he could do. It wouldn't be a very good blocker for Psychic Frog, though. And Tim now decides to run out at sorcery speed the Spectacular Spider-Man, which is a new addition to the game. This creature does have flash, but I suspect that Tim, having just had his turn 1 creature countered, he wants to play around future counter spells. Vlad, obviously unconcerned, doesn't bother playing out the subtlety here. He does draw a Metamorphosis Fanatic. Now, a little bit of a misplay here because the Metamorphosis Fanatic actually made it all the way into Vlad's hand before he declared it as his Miracle draw for the turn. Those who remember Miracle when it was around in Standard know that you should declare the card before it actually reaches your hand, which is where you get the Miracle draws, where you peek at the top card of your library before actually picking it up. But no matter here, again, as we've said before in video, this is FNM, and we're here to have some fun. Very clever play from Vlad, though. He discards the Troll of Khazad-dûm to the Psychic Frog in response to either him casting or the ETB of the Metamorphosis Fanatic so that it can bring back the Troll of Khazad-dûm. However, it appears that Vlad has forgotten to place a 1/1 counter on the Psychic Frog, which is part of the ability. It's evidenced by the fact that he goes to attacks, and Tim blocks with the 3/2 Spider-Man, and in order to save it, Vlad discards 2 further cards, making the Psychic Frog a 2/4, but really should be at this point a 3/5. Tim decides he needs to keep his creature in play, so he pitch casts the Reverent Mantra to keep it alive, giving it pro blue or black, and draws a card for the turn. It looks like he's drawn another fetch land, which would leave him on land, and Galadriel's Dismissal, which doesn't seem like an amazing hand against what's facing down approximately 1 million damage. And he can't overload either. The overload cost, I believe, is 4 on the Gladiator Dismissal, so he can't even fog Vlad for a turn. Vlad draws. Can't quite see what he's drawn, but I don't think it matters a whole amount. Looks like we're just going to crack straight into combat. Tim does some maths and scoops it up. So an extremely quick game 1. We'll see if we get to see a little bit more of these players' deck in game 2. If you're liking the brief content so far, please give us a like and subscribe and consider checking out our Patreon. Hello, welcome back to game 2. Tim is on the play and he gets to keep 7 cards this time. He's got a little bit of a land-heavy hand, but he's got all of his colours, Urza Saga, Arena of Glory for some utility with his lands. Has a nice combo of going Yoshi into Senu into Bombardiers. Obviously, Bombardiers can sack the Senu, and then the Senu can come back on a later turn when he attacks with a Yoshi or something else. And a Static Prison for a bit of disruption to interact with Vlad's game plan. On to Vlad's hand, he's got 2 lands. He's got some nice interaction with Flusterstorm, Stern Scolding, but he's got a very solid game plan of discarding the Archon to Norman Osborn and Animate Dead to bring it back, with a Force of Negation to protect the whole plan. So let's see how game 2 goes. Tim will lead on the Verge, which taps for white naturally, which is a perfect Verge for his deck, so he can go turn 1 Yoshi. Vlad will have a think. Is he going to play the Surveyor land on turn 1? Let's find out. It is a powerful play. But no, he's drawn a Dark Slick Shores, which will probably lead on instead, allow him to hold up one of his 1-mana interactive spells. There we go. Pass back to Tim. Tim's probably going to play out his Senu this turn. Seems like a relevant choice, with putting a counter on Yoshi. Start the beatdown plan. Sacks the Arid Mesa. And I think we're probably going to go and get a Sacred Foundry in Tim's deck. Yeah, there we go. So at this point in the game, I'd normally ask Ryan how his night went. As far as I'm aware, he was playing Felia for a nice change from Flubs, but I don't think it went all that well from him. I'm sure he'll tell us about it when we see him next on camera. Senu comes down, seems like a perfect addition for the Yoshi deck. Great to pitch to Subtlety at some other good interactions. But Vlad says no. And gets in just for 1. Vlad untaps, draws a Subtlety for the turn. Gives us a quick flash to the camera, thanks Vlad. And plays his Riverglide Pathway on the red side. And runs out the Norman Osborn. I think that's sensible, especially with Force of Negation. You just want to get your commander in play and start discarding cards. Now the Broadside Bombardier play is a little bit less exciting now, unless Tim desperately wants to get rid of Norman by sacrificing his Yoshi. Let's think about it. Urza Saga, the land for the play. It makes sense. Get that started. Maybe make some constructs as time goes on. And he will run out the Bombardiers. Could be looking to kill Norman Osborn here. But Vlad says no. Pitch cast Subtlety by getting rid of the Flusterstorm. And Tim has a little think about where the Bombardiers is going to go. It seems strong enough that he's going to keep it on top. And again, a free attack in, there's no chance that Vlad's going to block here. But this does somewhat leave the door open for Vlad to enact his game plan of reanimating this Archon. So start with an attack. Sensible to do. You get a Connive. You'd rather do that before playing your land for the turn, just to give you maximum information. It's going to discard the Archon as expected. Puts a counter on there because it's a Connive as opposed to a loot. And we will surveil first with even more information. Such a powerful addition to Magic. And yeah, as we suspected from the opening hand, Archon comes back on turn 3, which is very powerful. This is going to force the sacrifice of Yoshi, as well as discarding a card. Tim discards a land. And there'll be a 6-point life swing between the two of them. So things not looking great for Tim here. But he does have the Static Prison in hand to try and slow down Vlad's assault. So untap. Going to tick up Urza's Saga in the main phase. Draw that Bombardiers again. Not looking very exciting at all now. Tim's just checking the text on Animate Dead. There are some versions of cards like that where if the aura goes away, the creature is exiled rather than sacrificed, which would be preferable when you're looking at static prison targets. But in this case, the creature is sacked, so it stays in the graveyard to be brought back on a future turn. Tim's weighing up his options carefully here. Looks like we are going to go for the static prison. I think that's a must. Archon is a very quick clock. Hits the Archon, Animate Dead goes to the graveyard. Got a couple of turns where they're having to deal with that. I'm a little bit surprised that Vlad doesn't go for the Force of Negation here, since it seems pretty free, but maybe he's thinking of saving it for protecting Norman Osborn. I'm not sure. I just think it would be probably close the door on the game pretty quickly. Although he did surveil and he knew what was coming, and looks like an Emperor of Bones is the play for the turn, which is pretty nice. He can exile the Subtlety here and still have the 2-mana activation, which means that he can disrupt Tim's next creature play pretty much regardless of what Tim does. Must be pretty annoying for Tim to see this. Norman Osborn has a loot. And we're going to get rid of... Looks like he's pulling the opposition agent to the front of the hand, deciding between that and a land, I think. Decides to pitch the opposition agent in the end. Pass the turn. So Tim's going to need something good here. Draw. And tick up the Urza Saga to 3. He's got to make a decision here, and he's going to eventually have to tick down, in effect, the static prison down to 1 energy counter. I'm sure that'll be picked up in a moment. More importantly, Tim's got to decide if he's going to make a construct in response to this trigger or just float the mana. Here we see the static prison being updated. 1 energy left. I think Tim is considering what he's going to find here. I'm not sure how good making a 1/1 construct, well, I suppose it would be a 2/2 after the artifact found on board would be. So it does decide to float the mana, go looking for something. See what he gets. Pulls what looks like a Shadow Spear to the front of his library. Doesn't even finish looking through his library. That's clearly the card he wants. Shadow Spear will give a little bit of a buffer, give some life. But even though it triggers, even with triggering Yoshi and equipping, it's still only Yoshi's only going to be a 3/3 once it's all said and done. Got that 1 mana floating, and we're going to play out the Plaza of Heroes for the turn. Okay. So, mana floating plus Plaza of Heroes tapping for mana is going to pay for the equip cost. 3 mana... I think we thought about tapping Arena of Glory with Exert, but if he's going to play Bombardiers, that has haste anyway. As expected, in response to casting the Broadside Bombardiers, activate the Emperor of Bones. So Vlad gets a copy of Subtlety, which I ran for the turn, but manages to get rid of the Bombardiers altogether this time. Tim decides to put it on bottom, which I think is sensible. Pass the turn because no good attacks. 3/3 attacking into a 4/4 does nothing. Subtlety goes away at the end of turn. Vlad draws a Metamorphosis Fanatic, and same slight gameplay error as game one here. Vlad managed to allow the Metamorphosis Fanatic to make it all the way into his hand before declaring it as his miracle draw for the turn. But again, no real matter. This brings back the Opposition Agent, which I guess further reduces Tim's option. Although he's already played a fetch land, he's already played a Zerza Saga, so isn't that much more searching to do, I imagine, in his deck. Swings in for 7. No good blockers for Tim. Get another loot. This time the Exhume goes away. Not looking good here for Tim. Let's see what he can find. Right, pass the turn. Untap, draw. Static Prison ticks down to 0, so next turn, next Tim's upkeep, that Archon of Cruelty is going to come back in along with its ETB trigger, which is going to be pretty brutal. I didn't quite see the card that Tim drew for the turn. It's going to have to be something pretty spicy. Facing down a significant amount of creatures. Too many, in fact. So that's it. A very quick match. If you enjoy the games, give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next video.